Are there things we still need to address, and get better at? Yeah, of course there are. And the problem you get with business is there is a sort of that there's a problem when you get good in a business that people start to get a bit complacent, get proud.
Yeah.
You get a bit complacent. You say, well, we're the big guys in town. Yeah, nobody's going to kind of hit us, are they? We can just go on doing what we're doing. And pride leads to complacency, and complacency is almost always a prelude to failure.
Hello, welcome to Last Stroke Counts. Today's guest is a Cambridge University graduate, former partner at McKinsey, former CEO of Wiggle, where he grew the revenue fivefold by 130 million, and currently chief exec of PureGym, where since he joined the company in 2015, 9 years ago, PureGym, just in the UK, have opened a location roughly every 10 days. Humphrey Cobbold, please welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. This is really exciting. It's obviously a little bit of away from some of our other more rowing only guests, but as we sort of spoke before, we're not the first to sort of make the connection between sport and business.
Sure.
And certainly your business is also involved in sport, so
Yep.
A great person to talk to about those sort of things. But as we normally start, you sort of said you don't have much of a background in rowing. I think you put yourself down, but you did do a little bit in the past.
Indeed, yeah. Look, I was a lower boats oarsman when I was at Cambridge. I was at a college called Gonville and Keys, which has gone on to be one of the very successful colleges in Cambridge rowing over the last 25 years or so. I like to think that in rowing in the lower boats in the early 1980s there, we sort of built the foundation for the success that the college has gone on to have as headships of the CAM and rowing at Henley, I think, reasonably regularly over the last few years. But I was very much a kind of rugby boat rower. I played mainly rugby, and hockey actually was probably the biggest sport I played. I've always been fascinated by and loved sport and leading in sport. And rowing was another part of that. I kind of wish I'd done a bit more technically to get a bit more competent. I was never big enough to be really good, but I enjoyed that. My father had been an oarsman when he was at the same college in Cambridge as well, and had been secretary of the boat club, so it was a little bit in the blood, I guess. And then my son rowed a fair bit at Teddy's Oxford as well, including getting a third place in the Nat Schools when he was 16. And so he actually got technically pretty good as well. And he's gone on to other things now. So a bit of kind of context with rowing out there overall. Love the sport. Think it's a tremendous and enjoyable sport, and try and get out to watch it once in a while.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's difficult if you enjoy lots of other sports to get good at rowing, because it does require sort of all of your time.
Yeah, to do it properly, you got to put your heart and soul into it. Completely get that, and But I enjoyed the early morning outings out on the CAM. Yeah, we did a fair amount of it. We had a good laugh doing it. We always ended up in the Fort St George and a few beers afterwards if we could. So.
That's the way. Yeah, I mean, top end rowing is fun to an extent, but there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of work. And I think we've done the same. We've coached at Oxford colleges as well, and that's a bit more fun, and there's a lot more enjoyment. And you kind of remember that's why you get to the top. It's because you love that bit at the bottom, and you took it on. So yeah, that's definitely the fun bit of it.
Sport also gives you a great foundation into your life later on. It teaches you so many skills such as accountability, teamwork, discipline, getting up early, having to work towards goals, tracking your progress, looking after your health. I feel like it sets a really good foundation for what's to come later in life.
I would agree with that entirely, and I think there's a whole lesson in life, learning. You mentioned there, learning to school yourself and look after yourself. Sport teaches you a chunk of that. That's a pretty important life lesson as well. If you want to perform well in any way out in the world, in business or in any of the professions, then you need to have a way of looking after yourself and keeping yourself in good shape as well. I think sport's great for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I still tell people, we've even said it before, I feel like I deal with life better still now because of the lessons I've taken from rowing. And again, we sort of spoke before, but that's really the key, and something that's worked quite well with this business is just trying to repurpose those skills that we learned in sport. And I'm sure you've kind of seen the same thing. What would sort of be your thoughts on what you've taken from your sporting background?
Listen, sports in general, I guess, going back a bit in time, I as I said, I played rugby and hockey predominantly. Hockey was probably my biggest sport, team sport, very different from rowing, and yet you've got to put together coordinated action by a set of people. I think rowing sets a particularly high bar for that level of coordinated action. I mean, that's everything in rowing, and traditional sort of ball sports like soccer, rugby, and hockey provide a little bit more freedom for individual expression, perhaps, in things. But at the end of the day, you've got to put together a coherent set of actions by people. I found myself from a relatively early age often playing the lead role in sport teams. I captained many of the sports teams I played for at school, county level, college, and those sorts of things. And it was in those lessons of how do you participate in a team and contribute to it, but how do you lead and shape the outcomes for a team that I think some of the lessons are most pronounced.
Yeah, I was impressed at Oxford College when you go there that they all form part of the boat club. So as well as learning how to row and organise just yourself and your boat, someone's the president, someone's the treasurer, you've got the captains. You can kind of see how all these roles are definitely going to be taken into life later on.
Stuff has to be put together, and when you're at university or if you're just in sports clubs around the country, people need to make things happen. So somebody has to step up and say, I'm willing to put the extra time and effort into that off the field. And then when you're on the field or when you're in a boat, somebody has to be calling the shots. There has to be communication and direction. Everybody can't be making it up as they go along, or you typically have chaos in one type or another. And that leadership role, I think, is an important part of what makes good teams tick.
Yeah. And then obviously moving on from that, you've then become a leader in some really large companies. And like Pete mentioned, some huge changes in those while you were involved. Things like, dealing with pressure and teamwork and those sort of things. Is that something that you've kind of learnt back on from sport, or does it devolve?
To a degree. Look, I think there's some good lessons that you learn in sport that can be applied particularly in leadership, I think, in when you're doing things. Yeah, the self-discipline of training, of working hard, getting out of bed in the morning, getting stuff done. Those sort of things, I think, are all good parts of sport, and they're all good parts of having a productive adult life in whatever capacity you choose to work, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you work in business as I do, whether you're a teacher, or many other different professions that people do. All those things are good. From a leading point of view, there are some important lessons that you learn in sport. And I'll come on to some of these as well. I think there are some things that are different as well from when you lead in an organization.
Sure.
So there are some differences too, but let's come to those. What stands out for me in terms of leadership, you need to have clarity of communication. When you're leading a team, whether it's a rugby team or a hockey team or a rowing, somebody's got to be clearly communicating what we're trying to do. When races develop in rowing, they're not just continuous bursts. Somebody's got to be clear on when the rating's got to be upped, or when we're going to do certain things on the river. And it's exactly the same on the field of play in hockey and rugby as well. You got to call the shots about various things, and typically it's the leader and the captain.
Not adaptability.
You've got to be adaptable, got to be ready to read the situation, understand what's going on, understanding how you yourselves are doing, understanding what the other team's doing, etc. All those pieces come into play. So reading what's happening. Having a clear plan and strategy helps. I think it was Mike Tyson, however, who said that no strategy survives the moment when you first get punched in the face. So there's a whole sort of part of strategy, but not to a degree that in sports at least that stops you from reacting to what's going on.
Sure,
in business, actually, strategy I think is fundamentally more important in terms of the way you maintain. You think carefully about what your course of action is, and you maintain that based on a facts and understanding of how you can compete and be effective. Sports, they have to be a little bit more flexible.
Still, even in business, you're going to get some curveball that you never saw.
Well, look at the last few years. We've had a persistent series of curveballs. We had a pandemic. Nobody wrote that into the script for me. We've had massive inflation. We had energy price bubbles. All sorts of other stuff.
It's getting more and more difficult to call them once-in-a-lifetime events.
Yeah, exactly. There's been a whole load. I mean, the only certainty, the only certainty we've had over the last few years is things are going to come out of left field and surprise you. How ready are you to deal with them? There's a whole question of how adaptable and how strong and resilient you are individually and as a team when you're facing things of that sort of nature. Of course, it's not been easy in the world of sports. I mean, the whole Olympics got postponed by a year. Now I know the way that sports preparation works, particularly around the Olympic cycle. That's an extraordinarily difficult thing to react to and adapt to. These things all run on the cycles of competition for worlds and kind of Olympic events. And so I can only just imagine just how difficult that is.
Absolutely. In terms of preparation, like sometimes you plan your peaks like up to 2 years in advance. So you have to like work backwards from when your event is, and then you try and like hit that physiological peak just for like that 1 week of the Olympics. So like that's throwing a massive spanner in the works.
Although what I found really interesting, having spoken to a lot of Olympians, or rowers in general who were competing at that time, I found it fascinating how they've all managed to find a way to use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the quote, winners find a way.
Yeah.
And that's really interested me in terms of, okay, well, we couldn't do this. But I had my ego at home and I knew I needed to work on my fitness. So I made that happen, or I did this, or I spent more time with my family when I could, or just like been really fascinating to sort of see there's none of this sort of, again, sort of comes back to lessons learned from sport. It's not, oh God, poor old me, I can't do exactly what I wanted. It's like, right, that's off the table. What's next?
Yeah, look, it's exactly the same in business. I mean, when the pandemic hit and we had to then think about coming out of it and everything, you can't spend your whole time, moaning about the fact that it's happened. It was extremely damaging for us as a gym business. Government closed us down overnight. I went from having a business that was making a couple of £1 million a week to a business that was shipping out £10 million of cash a week. I mean, we had £90 million in the bank, so we had 9 weeks to go. We better do something about this, on day one.
Yeah.
You have to work really hard then to react to that, get cash burned down, etc. You can't spend your time saying, God, I wish this hadn't happened, or this is unfair on me. It decimated the value of the company, which I'm a substantial shareholder in it. You can't spend your time worrying about that. You just have to get on and do what needs to be done and work our way through the malaise of being closed and deal with 101 things. I mean, remember, we're a 24-hour gym. We didn't even know where the keys were for most of our gyms.
to lock the doors.
We were told to close down. I mean, we never closed most of them. So we had no idea. And someone said, oh yeah, Bill, who was the manager a year or two ago, I think he had a key. I wonder where he is now. I mean, it was literally like that. I mean, things you have to, and remember, it's not just we've got to find a few keys. 270 gyms in the UK, another 300 across, nearly 300 across Europe. We had to find a lot of keys to work out where we were going to, how do we lock that? How do you deal with that? How do you deal with water systems? Heating systems are going to be turned off. How do you deal with making sure you're not getting leaks? You don't want to go in 3 months later and discover that your water pipes have been leaking for the last 2 months.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff, especially when the government's saying, we'll put people on furlough, but you can't actually use them. You can't ask them to go in and check the sites for you if you're on furlough. You have to work out a whole different process for dealing with that sort of thing. So, that sort of adaptation that you have to go through as business when events like that happen was pretty telling. And I'm sure it was the same for sports people, dealing their own way with how do I deal with this sort of sudden chaos in our lives.
I also, as well as running this business, I also have a hair salon with my wife in Oxford. And obviously we, over, I think 7 months, was shut total overall. But one thing that I was really happy about is since we've been open about six years at that point, I'd always had a rainy day fund and I'd always kept some money aside, and constantly everyone was like, but why don't we take some out of that? And I was like, no, we got to have it. We got to have it. And finally I was sort of like proved right. I was like, this is why we had it. I told you we needed it.
Yeah. Good idea.
So that worked really well. Yeah.
In terms of also like transferable skills between sports and business, like honesty is a really big one, because sometimes you really have to like ask yourself the difficult questions, whether it's for evaluating strategy or like if you're dealing with like risk of injury or overtraining and things like that. And sometimes like you need to really change the course, and like of course like sometimes you'll get lucky in that and sometimes not. How did you find honesty like affecting your teams when it came to like actually putting your foot down in pursuit of the business goals that you've set out? Because things change. That's the main thing. Like we already just said, like you can't predict everything, and there's not a playbook for everything.
Look, I think that sense of honesty and authenticity and self-honesty is really important in sport. Clear about what you can do, what your team and capability is, and where you're going to fall short, and how you're going to overcome falling short. You'll be honest about your weaknesses to know how to address them. And that's a particular challenge in businesses, because part of what you have to do in a business, because you're always looking out to drawing capital and resources into a business, is you have to have a bit of a marketing shtick about business and how wonderful you are. So you spend quite a lot of time promoting the benefits and the strength of the business, whether it's to customers, whether it's to investors, whether it's to people you're trying to employ. And of course, you do that on a positive foundation and footing, and you tell a positive story about the business. Businesses aren't all positive. They've got problems, they've got issues, they've got challenges they're facing. And there's a risk that if you're not as honest about those challenges and issues that need to be addressed, they get overlooked, they get forgotten. You start to believe your own marketing line about the business, and you don't assess or reassess what you're doing and close out some of those gaps and weaknesses. And we've done, take the PureGym business, which I have the privilege of leading now. We're 370 sites across the UK. We're nearly 50% bigger than the next largest operator. I'd argue we've got the best product and model out there for affordable, accessible fitness. People can come any time of the day. It's about £25 a month on average across the country. You don't have to sign up to a 12-month contract. It works really well.
As a member, I can definitely agree.
I'm pleased to hear that. It's a really neat business. And we promote that well, and we do well on it. Are there things we still need to address, and get better at? Yeah, of course there are. And the problem you get with businesses, there is a sort of that there's a problem when you get good in a business, that people start to get a bit complacent, get proud. Yeah. You get a bit complacent. You say, well, we're the big guys in town. Nobody's going to kind of hit us, are they? We can just go on doing what we're doing, and pride leads to complacency, and complacency is almost always a prelude to failure. And you'll know that from sports as well. Yeah. Soon as you get a little bit complacent in sport, and you take the edge off the sharp edge off your training and the effort that you're putting in, somebody else isn't taking the edge off. They're working hard. And I know, one of the things I say to my team is every gym and fitness operator in the UK and European market is looking at us and saying, how are we going to beat them? That's the game in town. We're in all the major towns and cities now. We're still expanding into lots of other places as well. And everybody's saying, how are we going to beat PureGym? Then we've got to have a mindset saying, what are people going to do to attack us? How are we going to make sure we're still consistently good in hundreds of locations across the country? Because it doesn't matter how good we are on average. If you have a bad experience in one of our gyms, you can leave tomorrow morning with you. So we've got no constraints on people.
Absolutely. And then also, if you're at the top, everyone's chasing you. So you're the example that everyone's trying to beat. So then how do you innovate to stay on top? How do you sustain the growth? And
you have the courage to do that. So we've got a great product. And we're challenged. We raised a whole load more. We refinanced a lot of the business last year. We raised nearly £1 billion of capital last year to replace our existing debt with some new debt, so to reset. And now we're sitting down as a team now saying, good, we've got a plan going forward. We'll open some more sites this year. We know we've got things to improve. But how are we going to change the game as well? How are we going to innovate? Where do we have the courage to change some of the things that work well for us, such that we can do better in the future? We've done that in the past. We used to have a very standard model of about 18,000 square feet for a gym that was there. And that's great. With a great model, it still works really well for us. But take a town like Henley, where we are today. You can't put 18,000 square feet in there. You need 5,000 people to fill up the gym as members, and that's about half the population of it. Just too many people. So we've had to innovate, work out how to make new formats work. We can operate now down to about 6,000 square feet, and we're actually trialing an even smaller format as well. We'll keep doing some of the bigger ones where we can find them, but there are lots of smaller places where we can put smaller formats. You've then got to learn how to operate those differently, because it's a bit like a Tesco Express. A small local Tesco store is quite different from a big superstore. Exactly the same for us. If we're running 23,000 square feet in a kind of densely populated suburb of North London, that's quite different from if we were to run, whereas a place near here, Didcot near here, or Whitney, which are about 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. It's quite different management approach, capital structure, things that you put in. You've got to have the courage to innovate and try new things like that. Because if you don't want to do it, somebody else will. If it works, somebody else will work out how to make it work. So we might as well do it first.
Yeah, definitely. We talked in sport a lot. It's one thing to get to the top. It's another thing to stay there. It actually requires a different thing. And then the link to that is really, which again we've talked about before, is everyone starts as an underdog.
Yeah.
That's a very comfortable position to be, because you're not expected to win, but every time you do, it's a great benefit.
Yeah.
And then eventually, if you get good enough, you find yourself that you lose that underdog. You can't come to the table and be like, we're going to go get it. And all of a sudden, when you're on top, that's a very different kind of situation to be in.
So I think some of the great winners, and again we try and reinforce this, is you retain a degree of humility about it. You don't believe you've got some God-given right to sit on top of the stack. You earn that right every single day. But part of my message to my team in running PureGym is remember every other business that has been the leader in the gym and fitness industry in the UK and elsewhere has failed subsequently. Virgin Active, Fitness First, LA Fitness, all names of the past. You're an old lag like me. You guys probably don't even remember some of them. But they've failed. And what's going to stop us being the next failure in that history of failure? Why are we going to maintain that capability? One of the top sports people I've worked with a lot is Sir Chris Hoy, who's a phenomenal example of sustained performance in an incredibly competitive and tough field. And one of the wonderful things about Chris, who's become a good personal friend over years from cycling, and he's been an ambassador in the past for us at PureGym, is Chris has retained just an extraordinary degree of personal humility. He's just a thoroughly decent guy. He never believed right from the outset he had a right to be an Olympic champion. It was only going to happen if he trained and worked harder and focused more and just on a daily basis committed himself to what he had to do. And he never lost that ability over 10 or 12 years to work hard and just do a bit better than the other guys.
Yeah, I love the story from 2008 when he was doing the kilo, and he talked about, because they go in reverse order. So he's qualified for the final with the fastest time, but then he goes out and watches 4 cyclists in a row beat the fastest he's ever done. And then the next one beats that, and the next one beats that, and the next one beats that. And then he's got to come out and put down
it's extraordinary
the
stuff.
fastest performance.
Extraordinary. He's a wonderful guy. He's a great example for how somebody can be right at the top of their sport and yet retain an incredibly human, humble, feel to them. He's the sort of guy you just love to have a beer with. And kind of
there's another question I want to ask, because obviously with Wiggle and PureGym, you've been in the sport and fitness industry. Was that a conscious decision for you to kind of get into that industry, obviously because of your background or because it links, or did you just kind of happen to fall into it?
So I wish I could say I'd sort of targeted going into sports and fitness, which is always something that's been important to me and I love. And I'd made it happen. It wasn't quite as simple as that. Wiggle, there was an ad one Sunday morning in the Sunday Times business supplement for the role of chief executive of Wiggle. I'd barely heard of the business, vaguely. I was looking to make a career move. I'd been an investor in the private equity industry, and I'd always promised myself I'd run something. And I thought, this looks kind of interesting. And that's how I came to hear about it. It was a time when I was getting a bit back into sports and activity in general, and cycling in particular. My kids were growing up a bit by then, so I had a little bit more time in my agenda. I was also in my early to mid 40s. I realized I'd put on £1 a year for every year since I'd left university, and this had better stop at some time. So I needed to start doing more exercise and more activity and getting back under control a bit more. The problem of the professional life is you work a bit hard, eat a bit too much, and probably drink a bit too much as well. And, all that sort of happens. And so I got into it really by chance. I managed to convince them that, despite the fact I didn't tick any of the boxes of the sort of chief executive they were looking for, that I'd be able to handle it. And I got the job, and the rest, as they say, is history.
But sometimes that's good. That's sort of
into it.
Out the box thinking, isn't it? You don't always want to go with the same thing.
Correct. And one of my beliefs in life is, you'd always rather be lucky than good. Being good helps as well, but be lucky, and you can manufacture a degree of your own work, own luck by putting yourself in the right place. In that case, I had a bit of time. I wrote to the headhunter who was looking for the person. I got hold of him. His opening line was, interesting you called me. I'd put you in the kind of reject pile because you got none of what we're looking for. In a very nice way. Why should I be talking to you? And we had a chat. He was a bit enlightened by that. And then we met, and that's sort of, you make your own luck by being a bit persistent and trying things. and making it happen. I believe you can have quite a lot of influence over things that in some ways are lucky.
Yeah, I agree. The same thing. Yeah.
So in terms of running a business, like that was your first leadership role in terms of, the buck stopping with you, people looking up to you for decisions and everything. How do you find yourself, sustaining the leadership keys in like a meaningful way? So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what's your philosophy on leading, and what are some of the principles that like create a strong team culture in the environments that you work in? Because obviously we must say, I think for anybody that what you've done at both PureGym and Wiggle is pretty astounding. And like obviously having a great team is important, but also like teams just don't fall out of nowhere. They're created for sure.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. But let me start at the beginning. Going into lead a business on day one when you've never done it before scared me shit. I had convinced them that I could do it. I wasn't sure I quite convinced myself. So you go in, and in theory, I've been advising chief executives and working alongside them for all my career at McKinsey. I'd then been in a major newspaper company and worked alongside as part of a senior management team. I had then been an investor in businesses for a private equity firm as well. I knew my way around the theory of doing stuff, but it's quite different when it's you in the block hole and you walk into an office and you're meeting everybody and they're all looking up to you for the next series of decisions. I had to learn pretty quickly how to be able to project a calm authority, guidance and direction, even though I wasn't always feeling calm or clear or that I necessarily had authority. So early on, I'll be completely open. It's really difficult. People talk about the imposter syndrome. I'm generally a confident, outward-looking, reasonably extroverted sort of guy, but you definitely felt that sense of, God, do I really know what I'm doing here? And the reality was I was making it up a bit as I went along. But I built sort of good skills and capability in working out what the right sense of direction is, working out what sort of team that you need alongside you to follow that direction. And gradually, Wiggle was really my training ground for that. I learned about how you have to put those pieces together in a business context. There, I think sports experience of having pulled together teams, led teams at various different levels at school, at university and club sides. I think you do develop, I think, a bit of a natural presence perhaps as a leader. It always felt comfortable for me from really quite a young age stepping into the leadership position and doing that. And so I think, and I certainly have had reflected back to me by people who've worked with and for me, that I can project that sort of sense of confidence to people. I'm pretty honest with people when we're dealing with uncertainty, but I don't allow the uncertainty to become a sort of freezing effect or a barrier to us getting on and doing what can be done. The pandemic was a great example of that. We didn't know what was going to happen next. All we actually had to know was what had to be done today. Each day was different. You were working on things you'd never worked on before. Right? What do we need to do today? What's the plan for the next week? How does the week fit together? Right, everybody clear on what they're doing. Let's make sure. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
But the point on the point one that you made, is assembling the team is really important. And probably over the years of being a chief executive, and I've been a chief executive now for sort of approaching 15 years, that ability to shape both the membership of the team and the values and the way in which you insist that people interact and work together, what they do and what they don't do, and how we behave with one another. That's absolutely essential because, particularly in business, you're orchestrating a team, actually cascading sets of teams that you need to set the kind of rules for really clearly. You need the right people in the boat or on the bus, as people say in sort of management sort of speak. But you need them behaving in the right manner, and you need to be intolerant of some bad behaviors that crop up. People sniping around the edges, bringing you problems to resolve that they should resolve because they can't quite interact with the people to do it. All those sort of things need to be sorted out.
There's so much responsibility when it comes to leading teams, and I think sports is like a really great way to get some management experience. Like that's what I've done after university. I've realized if I continue to work in a corporate environment, it will be quite a few years before I start to lead my own team, become responsible for them, etc. But then pretty much out of the bat in sports, when you try to coach a team, like both between Tom and I, we were managing 60 athletes, all of their problems, phone calls up until 11 p.m. Oh, this has gone wrong, that has gone wrong. So it can be quite daunting, like with quite a bit of pressure of having so many people to be responsible for.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you're as a leader, whether it's of a group of athletes of that nature, or whether it's of a team of more coherent sort of team, just a rowing eight or a bulky team or a rugby team, you're responsible for kind of coordinating the direct activities and how that set of things come together on and off the field of combat or the river or whatever it may be. The difference with business, when you're leading a business, especially a slightly larger one rather than smaller one, is you have to project leadership successfully through to not just the immediate team you're directly in contact with, but hundreds and sometimes thousands of other people. And PureGym, for example, our total headcount's about 7,000 people, about 3,500 people as FTEs. I've got to find a way of making sure that the people in the organization as a whole, as far as possible, have some sense of what we collectively are trying to do together, and what I specifically are asking of the organization in its entirety. Now, of course, the average assistant manager in a site in the northeast of England or in Denmark, where we have a business, doesn't have to know me personally, doesn't have to have that much of a relationship with me. That's not going to happen. But you want them to be operating within an environment that says, I know what I'm meant to do. Most importantly, I know why that matters. I know where I fit in. I know why it makes a difference if I do well, such that I contribute to something that I feel has a sense of purpose and meaning to it. And finding a way that's different, I think, from traditional sports leadership, in that you have to think quite hard about the communication channels and the way in which that message filters out almost by osmosis out there, because it's not, you can't write everybody emails, you can't blast stuff out there all the time. It's more subtle than that, and different ways in which the messages get across and that people understand what you're about and how you take advantage of those opportunities is important.
Delegation becomes more important.
Well, that definitely comes back to having, like you said, a clear plan, and so you know where you're going, and then obviously clear standards and clear goals. Definitely. Setting standards, obviously, is, again, with sport, is a huge thing. But yeah, it's interesting. I've always sort of wondered, having run a few small businesses, but mostly, certainly from the start, being involved in every part of it. Yeah. And then as you get bigger and got some more employees, the salon, we've got maybe 14 now. With Rowgear, there's 4 or 5 of us. Taking that step back, having that ability to trust someone else can do the job that you've been in charge of, I think is a really, really difficult thing. And the example I've always sort of wondered was JD Wetherspoon's, where he started with 1 pub, and then he was a pub owner, and then he had 3, so you're an area manager, and now you've got, I don't know what it is, thousands. How do you change from just being the pub owner to being the guy who oversees all of it? Especially when you start at that level, that's probably what you enjoy doing. Yeah. So you kind of have to leave that job behind. Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, my honest response is I've never done that startup. I'm not a startup kind of guy. What I've proved I can do pretty well is, actually, both the businesses I've taken on from the original founders. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the opportunity, excuse me, and the potential to develop those businesses to become significantly larger and more performant than I think the founders would ever have seen being possible. The original founders of Wiggle thought that if they could make 50 to 100,000 pounds each a year out of it, then that'd be a good outcome. They made a lot of money from the capital they sold, and the business at its peak when I was running was making 25 million pounds a year. So, we did pretty well on that front. And Peter, who founded PureGym, phenomenal serial entrepreneur. Really, he was really into property and property deals for gyms. He wasn't really into gyms at all. He thought maybe PureGym could get to 100 sites. When I joined it, we were already at 80, and I didn't know how many it could become, but I knew there were 7,000 sites, 7,000 gyms in total in the UK, 35,000 across the whole of Europe. And I knew we had a phenomenally strong model. I knew we could do a lot more than 80 or 100 sites. We're at 370 now. I think we'll go to 700 or maybe even 1,000 across the UK. That'll be 15% of the sites in the UK. So my mindset had always been and has always been, how do I build the capability and the capacity, not just to open another gym or two or make sure we go forward a bit, but to build a really scaled enterprise, keeping the costs in check, but making sure I'm hiring people who can do that with me. So I've hired almost exclusively in PureGym outside the gym industry because nobody's run anything as big as we're going to run.
Okay, yeah.
So I've hired people from big retail operators. Rebecca, who runs all the operations, woman, a phenomenal lady. She used to be at Asda Walmart. I mean, Walmart employs whatever it is, 5 million people around the world. And
wow.
She wasn't the slightest bit daunted when I started saying, well, 300, 400, 500 sites. Indeed, she thought, that sounds a bit small. So it can be a bit boring, isn't it? You want people who have that mindset alongside you, who understand the process, discipline. What you have to replace your personal activity over the controlling elements with process, discipline, rhythm, routine. We can't run a 400 plus site chain in the UK if we don't have discipline, routine, processes and systems that tell us what's right, tell us what's wrong, have processes where people can see that. We force this as low down the organization as possible to allow people to take action locally to fix problems in certain, in a gym where they come up and have the authority to do that, because you can't run that from the center. You have to empower people in the front line, but you need to keep control over that in a disciplined way. Otherwise, things soon get out of control.
Yeah, I like that. That's really, really interesting. It's one thing that's frustrating is when whatever business it is you're dealing with, you feel like you're not talking to a person who has any ability to actually help you or who can actually make any decision. And you're like, well, can I speak to someone who actually could make changes?
Could do something here.
Yeah.
And look, with this, we'll suffer from that sometimes because you can't make that perfect. We generally want the people who work in the front line of our business to have a sense of ownership for their own facility and the community that they're serving and the difference they make to people's lives. That's a really important part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. In terms of obviously managing 7,000 employees and having so much responsibility, what are some of your tips for keeping a healthy mind so that you can operate at the highest level? I've heard you talk before about your shed system.
You've heard about the shed system.
I love the shed system.
Okay.
I've started implementing it, and it's a really good framework. It's good to have something to fall off. But would you mind explaining to our listeners?
And I have to start by saying I've stolen a bit of this from a book called The Shed Methodology, written by a lady whose name I always forget. But it's an excellent starting point. But I have adapted it a bit. So, shed, 2 S's at the beginning. First of all, set up. So get yourself set up right. Make sure your technology works. Make sure your office setup works. If you need an assistant or somebody to help you or something, have that in place. But get yourself set up. Give yourself a sporting chance, to do well. Second S is sleep. Most people don't sleep enough or think enough about sleep. There's a great book written by a guy called Matthew Walker called Why We Sleep. You can dip in and out of it. It's really thoughtful about... I came from a school when I was in the kind of sleeps for wimps. We're all a long time dead. That kind of thing. Get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, you go. And I used to, when I was doing triathlons and things, I'd get up and train at 5 in the morning for 2 hours and get out there, and that was great. And I didn't really rate sleeping much. Matthew Walker's book made me think again very hard about that. So that's the second S. H, hydration. You're sports people, you guys will get that entirely, but lots of people simply don't hydrate themselves enough. And coffee and wine doesn't count.
Coffee all day.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't count. It's a diuretic. It doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
Plenty of water. And I'd say there's a lot to executives out there who lead difficult lives sometimes. Look after yourself, and hydration's one of those. E, obviously, you guys need no conversion to this. Exercise makes such a difference. I get all stages of your personal life and development. As you get a bit older, like me, and your bones and your body starts to freeze up a bit more. It's even more important to get out and do exercise. It's well known now that the best possible treatment for back injury and aches and pains is get out and do some exercise, get blood flow going and make a difference. Really, really important. D, the first of the 2 Ds, I've added another D on the end, is for diet. eat sensibly and properly. I'm not obsessive about diet. I like a good steak like anybody else. But we all know that we should be eating a bit better rather than less well. More fruit and vegetables. I love the phrase, the title of one of the books. Eat food. Meaning things you recognize as food, not processed stuff. Less rather than more. Keep your portions under control, and eat a lot of plants. I think that's quite a good idea. But you don't eat only plants or anything unless you particularly want to, and that's fine. And then the final D, I think, is distraction. I think it's really helpful if you're an intense individual, if you're intensely focused on sports, rowing or otherwise, and it's occupying all your mind. If you're intentionally focused, as I become at times on the business that I'm running and operating, it's really important to have some distractions that take you away from that. I still do a lot of cycling and stuff. I love the feeling, the rhythm of cycling, the kind of flow of the pedals, and that somehow has some therapeutic impact on me. I read a lot still. I try and do things outside, but you need things that take you away properly mentally from what else otherwise is churning through your mind. Otherwise, it's not giving you the break you need. You need proper distraction, not something it's not like watching a movie with your phone next to you where you're constantly checking your emails. That doesn't count as a distraction, to me. But that's really important to have that counterbalance in things. So that's the SHED methodology.
That's just brilliant. I love that methodology. I've struggled a lot with distraction and not actually berating myself for taking time off and thinking I should be working. I need to be the most productive machine out there, and then actually become less productive. You operate less efficiently, and
especially if people are raising families and you've got various draws on your time. You've got relationships, you've got family, you've got work. Is it okay? Is it okay to give yourself some time just for you, for your own well-being? Categorically is. All those others around you who are relying on you in one way or another, and your other self will thank you for it. Have the courage to find a way to do that.
Yeah. Also, in terms of exercise, do you find that confidence from your sporting achievements carries into business? Obviously, having done an Ironman at the age of 50, did you find that translated in any way into how you lead and build teams?
No, I wouldn't say directly, no. I feel, it's more, I guess, subliminal and related than that. If I'm exercising regularly, getting blood flow going, I just think I do a better job of pretty much everything else I'm doing. There's something that comes from that time you spend that is unambiguously on yourself, that's beneficial for you. There's lots of good evidence. I had a neuroscan recently for one reason or another, and it was quite interesting. One of the things the neurologist said to me, I'm in my very late 50s now, this was a couple of years ago. He was looking at my scans. He said, really interesting. I had to check your age because your scan looks about 5 or 6 years or maybe a bit more younger than your age. And we got talking. I found what I did. And he said, that completely makes sense. They know as neurologists, the single most important thing to do for long-term brain health, which, by the way, is code for reducing the likelihood of you getting Alzheimer's and dementia, is exercise and activity. All the stuff about doing Sudoku puzzles and word search and things like that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. There's no evidence at all it's going to do you any good from long-term brain and mental health. But exercise, because it increases blood flow, incredibly important. And if that improves your brain health, that's got to help you in thinking and making decisions and making tough calls on the way things work as an executive or in business or in sport or whatever it may be.
Yeah. I found that a lot with mental health and exercise. The link is immense, and I was really glad when gyms reopened after the pandemic. PureGym's played a really big part in getting myself back on track after finishing my rowing career. I'm now on a 745-day gym streak every day, going in a row.
Impressive.
And
I'm not.
And PureGym has played a massive part in that, because actually we travel all over the country, and actually being able to go and access gyms and at any different times.
It's a pretty common setup everywhere, so it's familiar, all that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
That's great to hear that. I'm really pleased.
In Edinburgh last week.
Yep.
I joined him at Edinburgh West, which is
Edinburgh West. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well.
It's good. It's good. No, I'm not at the Pure Gym in Oxford. There's a local gym.
That's okay. No, well, convenience matters. You can't be convenient to everybody.
Well, I get
slots.
I get free membership because I fix their rowing machine. So it's a good deal. It's a good deal. The distraction thing for me as well is something that I speak a lot. I sort of mentor a few people now, and for me, the problem now with the phones and everything is I find sort of if you love your sport or whatever you're into, you can sit on YouTube and just watch it all day. Even once you've finished doing it, you're still looking at.
I don't think that's a distraction. It's a bit like wine and coffee for hydration. It doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not the distraction. You're not getting away from it.
And I found it when I was in the cycling world. Cycling became a big part of my life personally as well, and I still, as I said, love cycling. But it became a problem for me as well because I was thinking, sleeping, eating, breathing, bike stuff, 5 days a week at work, 6 days a week at work. So I work like a nut. And then what I do at the weekends to kind of socialize with people, I'd go on a bike for 4 or 5 hours, and it actually really depleted the enjoyment I got. Right, it's actually when I finished with Wiggle and left, it was quite nice to rediscover just the joy of cycling without feeling that it was halfway to being work and stuff. And I got to cycle with some really cool people because you meet the pros and go out and do stuff and things. But even so, it became like working, and so something that I loved became a bit like working, which I thought was a real shame.
That's tough. Yeah. Also, Henley's such a nice place for cycling.
That's tremendous cycling.
We used to do quite a lot of
stuff off and on roads and great trails.
Yeah.
Stuff.
We used to do some cross training with Leander, but I do really enjoy it. But I'm 6'8" and 105 kilos.
So I've just discovered the joy of
electric bike.
Which is, I mean, this is not a wimp out option or taking the easy route, although it does help at times. Phenomenally, I have a little place out in Mallorca, and I have one out there, and it's just amazing the stuff you get up. Puts a real smile back on your face.
Everyone else loves when I cycle because I am the world's biggest wind shadow.
You're the big bloke in the front and
I just think, where is everyone?
I tell you, the rowing guy who is phenomenal at that, James Crackers.
Yeah.
Crackers, who is well known for being a bit crackers. Wonderful guy.
Yeah.
I was on a sort of route out cycling, and he was on it out in Italy some years ago. And there were a couple of ex-pros cycling, and James there was a big unit, a big strong lad. And we were going up hills, and gradually everybody got dropped off. I got dropped off, and it ended up being Cracknell and a couple of the pros up at the front. And the pros are a bit like that; they'll gradually wind up a little bit. At the end of the day, 2 of the pros said they'd never see a big guy who could keep with it and keep climbing at that sort of. So you shouldn't be able to do that, given this. But these guys are. The pros are 58 kilos.
Yeah.
Wow.
A guy like Cracknell just shouldn't be able to stay.
I mean, there's
Lawrence
stories.
Delalio being out the back for ages and stuff like that. He's phenomenal like that.
Yeah, there's stories from his lactate readings from back at GB Rowing. There's another funny one from he always used to try and win every year ago. So they went away on an altitude camp, and every other member of the team took it in turns to sit next to him and try and beat him. And all week he wouldn't let anyone beat him. He's just unbelievable. Yeah,
he's like that, but phenomenal. But for a big unit, Lawrence, who did quite a lot of cycling, Lawrence Delalio, big rugby player. Yeah, he was brilliant to cycle behind because he'd go quite hard and he knew how to hurt himself really well. But he got a big wind shadow. And then when it got really tough and stuff and the road steepened, even I could just pull out and just go, just ease past him, and go on.
That's tough. It's tough when you're heavy. Yeah.
Great.
We want to finish off a little bit just talking about sort of changing industry in CrossFit, but just briefly before that, I just thought it worth without sort of talking about it too much. Obviously, when you finish Wiggle, that didn't necessarily finish in the way that you wanted. And again, in terms of talking about maybe sort of coming back from failure or reassessing things like
Failure's
that.
a strong word, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily.
No, I think you're being very nice about it. I walked into a room and got fired, and that's never a nice experience.
No.
I'd done the context to that was we'd done a phenomenal job with the business. Part of my role in the business was to sell it for the founding shareholders and the existing shareholders, which was another institution. Another firm of private equity owners came in and bought it. They paid. I got them to pay a very high price. It was always going to be hard to live up to the requirements and expectations they had on performance there, and they inevitably became aware that they'd paid a very high price for us. That always sticks in the throat a bit. So the relationship was always going to be challenged in that regard. And it's part of the Faustian pact that you sign when you work with private equity capital and owners. And I'm a huge fan of private ownership and private capital and private equity, and because I've done well out of it as well. I did well out of selling the business at that price. I made some money, and that's set me up for life. I probably wouldn't have a nice house near Henley if that hadn't happened. But inevitably it became too strained. I disagreed with their diagnosis of the situation. Stuff happened that didn't work out. That they, as the owners, absolutely have the right to remove me and replace me with somebody who they think will do a better job, and that's what they chose to do. I genuinely bear absolutely no ill will in that regard. But for somebody who in general has had a life of success, I was a scholar at school, I was a scholar at university, I'd progressed through great places like McKinsey and that sort of thing, to get whacked over the head and fired one day in a meeting room, not part of what you have as part of your grand plan and things. But I think it was one of the most important things that happened to me. It re-taught me some important lessons on humility. It's made me much more thoughtful about, you have to deal with difficult people issues in businesses. Well, I deal with those. I think I deal with them much better than I would have done otherwise. I proved to myself I could come back from a knock like that, and it was a knock. I was, for 2 or 3 months, I was pretty raw around the edges, and I felt that I'd failed myself, my family, and the business and the investors, on all fronts. And I never went into a kind of deep funk or anything, but it absolutely hurt. But to prove you can come back from that, I think is important. You have plenty of time to think about why it had happened and what I would or could have done differently. Whether I could have changed that or not, I don't know. At the end of the day, I found an even better thing to do in doing PureGym as a result of it. So clouds do have silver linings.
Well, I'm very glad
things work out in the end.
It's reassessing, like, it's a key skill, isn't it? Looking back and doing a bit of a debrief. It's something we talk about, and we've talked about before, about how important the debrief is. But also it's something we've talked, it's not my line, but I like talking about if you were going to create the perfect athlete, or the most successful athlete you could, what situations would you put them through in order to do that? It wouldn't be an easy ride. It's part of the course. Understanding that it happens to everyone. And, bouncing back from it, I think, is another key skill that you can learn from sport.
Absolutely right.
Cool. Awesome. I guess we just got to talk a little bit about changing industry. In the last few years, I've definitely, since joining PureGym in 2018 it was, so a few years ago, I've noticed there's so much more emphasis on functional fitness training. The way that people train has changed. And then over the last sort of 2 years, we've seen so many different CrossFit gyms pop up all over the country. And also, one of the predominant pieces of equipment is rowing machines. And I've also seen PureGym make massive investment in that regard. Is this part? Sure. Is this part of a strategy to sort of combat those independent gyms?
Well, it's not so much combating. I think what we try and do, and again, this is part of the point I made about humility and about never just believing your own shtick or believing that you've got things all right. You can always improve. What's actually happening out there is there's quite a big movement from cardio-based training to functional strength and conditioning-based training. Well, and why does that matter to us? Because we have to make a decision when we open a facility what equipment we're going to put in. And our traditional, when you go back 6 or 7 years, our standard package had 28 treadmills, 12 cross trainers, 6 recumbent bikes, etc., probably 1,000, maybe 1,200 square feet of space put across to free weight training, no proper functional training area, a bit of stretch, and that sort of thing. It was a cardio dominated proposition, and that's where the market was 10 years ago. That people went in, press the green button on a treadmill and get going. That was the sort of standard sort of thing. Now, as you're alluding to, that's changed a lot now. So when we open facilities now, and when we refurbish facilities, we try and listen very carefully to what we're seeing and observing members are actually wanting to do. So the typical equipment package now would probably have 12, maybe 16 treadmills in it. So half or less than half of the cardio capacity in space, double or even treble the total free weight conditioning and functional space, prowler tracks, rigs, ski ergs, rowing continues to be a strong part of that piece. I mean, normal people, not kind of boaties like you guys, typically spend about 5 or 8 minutes on an erg and that sort of thing before they're dying. It's a tough exercise, right? It's a tough exercise. It's a tough, brilliant full body exercise. I think I'm almost certain we run more row machines than anybody else out there in the country by virtue of our estate and scale. So one of the reasons we're talking to British Rowing at one stages, we wanted them to be aware of that, and that we're there for rowing people around the country. It's great sort of backup. As you know, people should be doing ergs and that sort of thing, but be doing cross training and lots of other stuff as well, and we provide that too. So you're seeing that change. It's wonderful to see more women doing that as well, more strength and conditioning. We run weight training introductions and lifting introductory training for women in most of our facilities. Now in most weeks, you can do classes. Women in particular feel a bit intimidated by the big lads lifting weights and things. There's no need for them to feel intimidated. They need to understand how to put a weight bar together, what to do and what not to do. Form matters a lot in that sort of area. So we're seeing that trend evolve. Yep, CrossFit's and CrossFit's interesting. It has grown a lot. It's sort of come off the cut. It was on a very strong growth curve pre-pandemic. It's still there, very much so. We want people to be able to do that in our facilities. But if you're a CrossFit junkie, you're going to go to a CrossFit place. But what we see is quite a lot of people who do other things, CrossFit, Pilates, yoga, lots of other things, will often do that alongside having a PureGym membership, saying, well, actually, there's a set of things I can always fall back on PureGym to do normal stuff, where classes as well, so they can still do that. But it can be part of a repertoire of physical activity and engagement and running in the park and cycling bikes that people can and should do at relatively low cost and ease for people.
That's what I love about PureGym, is the ability to just train in many different ways and not just be a single dimensional. So that's been a big part of training.
The big thing, you can do what you want, you can do when you want to do it, so you can fit around schedules, and you take advantage of a lot of equipment there. Most people use about £20,000 worth of equipment on an average gym visit. They'll spend some time on a treadmill, they'll do some weights, they might do a class with stuff in there, do a bit of cross training, or maybe 10 or 15 minutes on a hill, on a climber or something like that. And that's nobody's going to spend that sort of money on their own home gym on average. Rich people can do that, but normal people can't. So that ability to have access to that much equipment, in essence, what people do, if you think about it, is we're a part of the sharing economy. People rent what they want for the hours they want it, when they want it, and then walk out without any of the hassle of maintaining it along the way. So so it works for that. And that's why it works really nicely as a product. Well, I feel really fortunate to run a business where I can feel good about what we're doing, where I can make a positive difference to people's lives. We get to make some money as well. It's a profitable business, so we can invest in the future.
And in terms of the return on the money you spend on the gym membership, what is it, like less than £1 a day? For how many hours are you going to spend there in a month? Like, name a better return on your time.
So £25. It's less than £25 a month on average across the country. It tends to be a little bit more in London, a little bit less outside, up in the north of the country, because costs are just lower and you can afford a bit less and things. But when you look at it, it's about the cost of 3 pints of beer, 4 pints of beer a month, a pint of beer a week, and you can do as much exercise and activity as you want and enjoy it. And we try to make the gyms are get in, work out, and leave. We don't do coffee shops and that sort of thing as well. We don't offer food and beverage or whatever. But the good gyms that we run with when colleagues are on their money, develop a good spirit and sense of space. And we're talking to lots of younger people who perhaps are sharing flats with other people and need some space on their own, and it gives them a third space they can go to outside home and work, to just spend a bit of time, clear their heads and get on with things.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting. Obviously, as you said, in terms of not necessarily trying to compete with CrossFit, which is a huge industry, but in terms of like trusting your vision and what you want to do, but also listening to the feedback from the customers.
Yeah, we can evolve. And actually, these trends come out, they don't happen overnight, and we don't try to follow fads overnight, because fads come and go year in, year out. But, over a 5-year cycle, we refurbish gyms every 5 to 7 years. You can see that doing, and we don't just, as anybody knows, we don't just swap out the old kit and put in new. We say, actually, how does the product need to evolve? Typically means we have to reconstruct some extra free weight space or functional space, take space out of cardio, relay the gym, make it work. Because we're a profitable business, we can afford to do that. Because anybody can open a new gym, but keeping it fresh and keeping equipment working, keeping it in good condition and reinvesting, to keep it there rather than just sort of milking the asset that was there in the first place, we think is really important.
The other thing we sort of joke about a little bit is it sort of feels like sort of 10 years ago, people would be like, oh God, the row machine, that's so hard. I don't want to do that. And I feel like this whole CrossFit movement has been, and now people are like, oh my God, the row machine's so tough. Let's do that again. And it's like this whole different kind of switch in like how to work out. People seem to be, really, it's great. I think it's great that people are doing it. And like you said, it's great to be in an industry where you feel like you're actually benefiting.
We want to make a big difference to the nation's health. I mean, we have about 1.5 million members in the UK now. We'll build that up as we open more sites. We want to make we all know that we've got a kind of health problem in the country, and the National Health Service is incredibly challenged. Every bit that we can do collectively to make exercise and activity and the healing benefits of exercise and preventative benefits of exercise and activity more available to people, we think is really good. And we're really driven by that sense of purpose. Yeah, we've got to make money, and we were focused on making money. We're in business. We're not a charity, but most of the people who work in the business are in it because they want to make a positive difference to people's lives and can earn some money as a result of that. We're not dealing with people who are just thinking about working on a different shopping checkout or something like that. I always kid that the guys and the women running our gyms are the people who used to muck around sometimes a bit at the back of the class. And a lot of their schoolmates say to them, I can't believe it. You spent your whole life as a teenager in a gym anyway. Now you're paid to be in one. How good is that? And that's a lot of what we benefit from it.
Yeah, I like the same thing. With my business, at the end of the day, I like what I do, and in order to keep doing it, I need to make a bit of money. So, and I think you can have. I think some people think that you can't. You either got to be helpful or you got to make money, but you can't do both.
And ours is more of an obligation. That if we don't make good money, we can't invest to refurbish and maintain facilities, and we certainly can't generate cash and cash flow to be able to invest in new ones. I mean, the shareholders have never taken a penny out of the PureGym business. We have to pay interest on our debt. Ultimately, shareholders will sell the business, but we reinvest all the cash flow that the business generates back into the business, either providing for the capital that we have already in the form of debt, or refurbishing, maintaining, or opening up new facilities. We're doing that. Why, of course, we believe that creates value for the future and it's good for people.
Definitely.
I love the evolution that I've seen at PureGym, and I'm looking forward to seeing it grow strength and strength.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you so much for coming on today, Humphrey. It's been fantastic to speak to you. Thank you so much for your honesty. It's been basically like a little business masterclass for us too, and hopefully for the listeners around the world. And I just appreciate all the lessons that have been shared. And if you'd like, at some point, we'd love to have you on again.
Okay, very much like to do that. Why don't we do that again in a couple of years' time or something?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
That concludes everything for today's episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.